Um, I myself, Peter Siegel, the director of DT's Division of Cultural Heritage. We'll start off by giving a little bit of an overview. I'm going to hand this over to Peter Stig Nielsen, who we thank you very much for joining us at such a late hour. He is Phase 1's manager for Cultural Heritage. And then the bulk of this webinar is going to be conducted by our very own Doug Peterson. He's going to talk about, firstly, some of the benefits of the raw workflow for those of you who don't have a lot of experience with Capture One or a raw processing engine. And then Doug will spend most of the time on discussing the features of Capture One Cultural Heritage 8. So let's talk a little bit about the history of digital transitions in Phase 1. Digital transitions has been serving the cultural heritage market for a long time, and we very much focused on Phase 1 products. We obviously used other cameras, meaning the lens system and so forth. However, these were basically off-the-shelf units used for portraiture, product, landscape, beauty, fashion, architecture, and so forth. You can use this equipment for doing cultural heritage imaging, but we found that there were some limitations, especially with institutions and service bureaus that do what we call industrial level imaging or in the process of image manufacturing. So to do that, we went about ourselves to build purpose-built machines, whether it's the machine that holds the material, such as our BC100 for doing 2 pages at a time for a book, standard copy stands like the RGC 3040 or the RGC 180, which has a built-in book platen, as well as a standard copy stand. We also made a film positioning system for rapid capture of film. Turrets for also the RCam, which is a purpose-built camera for doing high-end imaging of all sorts of material. This camera, in fact, was one of the more important cameras that we made, and we did it because, again, much better optics, much more durable shutter, and again, all its systems are very ergonomic as well. So if we then fast forward to last year, Phase 1 took a lot of notice of what we're doing within this market, and we sat down, we got together to talk. They very much loved our benches and RCam, and when we talked about doing an alliance or a partnership together for this particular market, what we all came to understand was that we needed better software that was better suited for this marketplace. Phase 1 and DT has always been known for producing equipment of extreme high quality. The digital backs are extremely fast. The image quality of the Phase 1 units were phenomenal. The DT RCam was extremely durable and reliable. But what we needed to deal with is a software system that integrated this entire suite of solutions together. So we went about to design Capture One Cultural Heritage 8. And within that particular version of Capture One, it has new interfaces for the varying roles that people play within cultural heritage and service bureaus. It has tools for doing film conversion, because this has become an incredibly popular tool for doing conversion of photographic films. And one of the bigger tools in here was the auto crop and auto straighten. Obviously, one of the heavier tasks that people have to deal with in museums, in libraries, and archives and service bureaus is the arduous task of cropping and rotating images. And the other big thing is adherence to national and international quality standards such as FADGI and Metamorphosa. So there are all these tools that are now built into Capture One. And I said this is the first release, and obviously we want you guys to give us as much feedback as we can. And I also want to introduce Peter Stig Nielsen, who is the manager of the cultural heritage market at Phase 1. And Peter has a very exciting background, and we're very excited to have him here today. And Peter, I'm going to give the mic over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I can say that here on the European side, we've had a beautiful spring day today. Now it's getting very dark. But it's a pleasure to be here and be part of this webinar on Capture One for the cultural heritage. As you mentioned, I am responsible for the phase 1 activities in the cultural heritage market, and I've been fortunate to be in this market for about 20 years, digitizing all the way from back in the 90s with the drum scanners through the Imacon scanner and through Hasselblad with a range of different cameras. And it's a pleasure now at phase 1 to have access to a modular system of camera systems based on large scanners, modular systems, and the Capture One, which we're going to hear more about. The combination of these camera systems with the digital transition reprographic systems, I believe, becomes a very good package for solutions, flexible solutions for the cultural heritage. We've seen at phase 1 a market growth over the past 10 years in the cultural heritage museums and libraries, but in combination with the DT solutions, we are really looking into some very interesting opportunities. And in my opinion, the birth of Capture One CH, which came about based on input from your side, Peter and Doug, and your customers on the US side, we are really looking into some good opportunities. Two keywords from my perspective is increased image quality for the industry and workflow. Workflow where you have made us available or made us aware of new ways to do things, and I really look forward to your presentation here. I think we're going to see some really exciting new ways of using Capture One in the heritage arena. It's a strong statement, and with that, I would like to hand back to Peter. So thank you for the introduction.
Doug, it's all you.
All right, everyone. My name is Doug Peterson. I'm at the New York office of the Division of Cultural Heritage and Digital Transitions, and we're going to start off by talking a little bit about Capture One in general. We're definitely going to get to the cultural heritage version very quickly, but for those of you who have not used Capture One or even still haven't used a raw workflow before, I thought I'd cover some of the basics, and then in a few minutes we'll move on to the new cultural heritage version. The three main elements that make Capture One a great workflow tool for cultural heritage are its solid development base, flexible and efficient raw workflow, and great image quality. The solid development is given to us by having such a large base of users. Capture One as a general release is used by a wide variety of photographers, still life photographers, wedding photographers, portrait photographers, and those users are paying for Capture One Pro, which provides a large paid user base that then pays for a large team of developers. And there's no doubt about it, having more team members on our team able to provide more talent and more time allow us to do things like keep up with operating system releases and provide bug fixes and support a broad variety of solutions. The next big thing is that it provides flexible and efficient raw workflow, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of this here. Flexible and efficient raw workflow in large volumes. So let's first take a look at just in Capture One, scrolling through a large collection of files. So in this case, we have in this folder 1,960 files, and just scrolling through them, you can see, of course, I'm not sure what the screen sharing connection, maybe it feels a little bit jerky for some of the users out there, but I can tell you here in person, it's a very, very smooth scrolling experience for me, and I can actually zoom all the way back out here and show you just a huge volume of files at once. For Capture One, based on that very good development team and based on the amount of time and energy they can put into optimizing the code, dealing with hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of files isn't pushing the program to its limits. It's the absolute norm and expectation. The next big thing is that working in RAW and working specifically in Capture One in RAW provides very good fast batch editing. So I'll give you an example of that. Here are 50 files. If the white balance is off a little bit on these, say that they were errantly set to be blue, right? We know this is not right. They shouldn't be blue. We can white balance a specific image. Here, I'll double click on one. I'll zoom into this golden thread target. I will white balance. I can then go back to all the thumbnails and sync that white balance right across with one click. And there, 3 seconds later, all images are up to date. And this is not just updating the thumbnails or updating a reference. This is, in fact, fully done. You can see each image here is correctly white balanced now. So fast batch editing is a really core part of the foundation of Capture One as it relates to Capture One Cultural Heritage because, of course, we're dealing with very large numbers of files in a typical workflow. Next big advantage is that Capture One is inherently scalable and it's inherently team-friendly. This means several things. It sounds very buzzwordy, but it's a very real benefit. Capture One can split up the duties of capture, quality control, and processing. So it's very common in a multi-team member environment. For instance, if you have 4 or 5 people on your digitization team, it's very common to have 2 or 3 capture stations, have 1 quality control and processing station, and the multiple capture stations can actually feed into the quality control and processing station. Because we're dealing with RAW, because we're dealing with Capture One, we can very easily offload different parts of the workflow to different computers. It's also very team-friendly in that settings, presets, workspaces, styles can be ported from one computer to another computer very easily. So all the computers with Capture One on your network can be very easily synchronized so that they all have the same settings and the same workflow, which makes it both easier to interact with other computers and less likely to make an error of some sort. The next big feature of raw editing is non-destructive editing. This falls into the do no harm mantra. This means that when we make an adjustment like a crop, it's not permanently applied to the file. We never, ever change the raw file in Capture One. We'll see a great example of how useful this is a little later today when we look at a color profile applied to a file captured in 2011, where we're still able to have the original raw data reprocessed even better today than when it was originally captured. Next, we have unlimited derivatives. And this means both we can create multiple derivatives from every original, and also that we can create different kinds of derivatives. We can do TIFFs, JPEG 2000s, JPEGs. We can do full-size files or reduced resolution. We can create versions with and without cropping and with and without sharpening, etc. This is very important for us as a lot of the cultural heritage usage requires different kinds of derivatives to be created, and instead of having to do that in a separate part of the workflow, we can do it from within Capture One. Then finally, all of this wouldn't matter if the quality of the image produced wasn't good. And fortunately, in Capture One, it is fantastic. Phase One has had a huge head start on most companies doing raw processing. Phase One started with raw processing when they first started doing digital backs, which were amongst the earliest digital cameras in the market. And so Phase One has a huge amount of experience and a huge amount of intellectual property related to how to best convert a raw file into a final TIFF. It sounds like a binary thing or a very straightforward or one way to do it kind of thing, but actually there's a lot of math and a lot of technique in the nuance of creating a TIFF from a raw file, and Phase One has really got it in spades. They also work purely off of standards-based ICC profiles. So unlike some other raw software out there that uses proprietary profiling methods, all the profiles you see in Capture One are standards-based ICC profiles. Now, again, that was all for people who haven't spent a lot of time with Capture One in general. So now I'd like to move on to Capture One Cultural Heritage, and what you'll see is there's a lot of similarity here. If solid development, flexible, efficient raw workflow, and great image quality are the characteristics that define Capture One 8 General, the general release of it, they are the same characteristics that define Capture One Cultural Heritage. For solid development, I think this is probably the biggest headline for today, and that is Phase One and Digital Transition Division of Cultural Heritage. We have dedicated development resources to this version of the software. That is, this is not just a one-time release. We didn't think of a couple tools, throw them into a version, give it a label, and now we're done with it. No. This is a continuing dedication to this market to continue to come out with new and better and improved tools for cultural heritage. And there are development resources dedicated to that purpose. We're also very fortunate, even before our first official release, to have a large beta group. Anyone on this call who was part of that beta group, I cannot thank you enough. Your feedback, your testing was invaluable in the creation of a good final product. And I'm hoping that as more institutions join in as a final release version here, that we get continued feedback so that we can continue this process. We've found so valuable the feedback we've gotten on tools like the AutoCrop, tools like the color profiles. We're really eager for the feedback on how to improve it even further. Next up, we have flexible and fast workflow. And we're going to cover each of these in depth, but for right now, I'll just sort of mention top level that we have workspaces. We have AutoCrop with AutoStraighten. We have a multiple crop tool, a transmissive processing set of tools, and AppleScript extensions. These are all built around providing the fastest possible second half of the process, right? We've always been very fast at creating the first half, creating the actual raw file, getting things in focus very quickly, getting color right very quickly. But it's that second half of the workflow, things like auto-cropping, that I think anybody here who has spent several hours manually cropping a few thousand files, maybe even many hours, I think you will find this to be a very big benefit to your workflow. Finally, great image quality. The base foundation of Capture One already has provided us great raw conversions, but two things we were missing were dedicated cultural heritage color profiles and lab readouts. And I'm glad to say that we've not only done both of those, but I think we've done a really good job of both. So I'd like to take you through each and every one of these now. It's be a detailed process, and we want to go through and show a lot in Capture One. And I promise we won't use too much more PowerPoint presentations, or I guess a Google Drive presentation. But I think before we move on to actually looking at these color profiles, it is important to sort of give a little bit of a history of what profiles we've had in the past, what profiles are prevalent out there right now, and why we think our new profiles we're bringing out now with this version and with future versions, why we feel that they're going to be such good tools for you. So C1 commercial profiles, that is to say, all the profiles provided by Phase 1 in the general release of the software so far. That has been created by Phase 1 very well, I think, and has gotten a lot of respect. If you just sort of Google Capture One color, I think what you'll find is a lot of people saying Capture One gives me great color. And they spent a lot of time on those profiles for commercial work. They shot a lot of targets, they shot a lot of captures under a lot of different setups, and they built and they used their own in-house ICC compliant color tools. But they were doing them for a different purpose. They were doing them for pleasing color. They were doing them for good skin tone. They were doing them for good greens and foliage and good blue in the sky. And they were not doing them for accurate color. And so for cultural heritage applications, they weren't the best. They were actually pretty good, and I think they were very respectable, but we knew we could do better. What we found was that a lot of our clients, therefore, did in-situ profiling. In in-situ profiling, you take a picture of a target one time with a camera and a specific setup. You feed the results of that file into Profile Maker or Delta.AE or other similar software, and it would shoot out a profile which would make that color target quite accurate. But we also got the same feedback from users that said, this is not what we want to be doing with our day. We do it because the commercial profiles aren't giving us the absolute perfect color that we need, but we'd rather not have to do it. It's also the case that in-situ profiling is tedious and time-consuming. You have to do it in a very specific way. And it can also be very error-prone. Even if you're being careful, if you make any mistake from the beginning to the end of the process, the profile you end up with can actually be very deleterious to image quality. So we wanted to try to do something better. And I'm glad to report that because of the dedicated resources we provided to the Cultural Heritage Edition, we were able to invest the time and the effort to go and create color profiles that are as good as the commercial profiles were at pleasing color, but instead are oriented around accurate color above all else. They were created by the same team, the same Phase 1 color team, created again by shooting many targets in many situations, and also being betaed in real-world institutions. And again, if anybody in this call was part of the beta program for our ICC profiles, we greatly appreciate your feedback. You helped us identify areas of improvement, and I think that really helped us to really nail it. But they've been very field tested as a result of that beta program. And what we hope you'll find, what we found ourselves, is that it provides good color target rendering. That is, if we take a color target, we take a picture of it, and we feed it into profiling software, it will in fact say we've done an excellent job of color. But it's also very good for objects. It's good for the rest of the world. What we found with in-situ profiles is that very often they're somewhat frail. If you put back the same color target you used to create the color target, if you put back in the same color target you used to create the profile in the first place, that color target often renders quite well. It passes validation and gets very good ratings. But if you use the same profile then on other targets or on real-world objects, the quality could vary. That it could be very good at a target, but very bad for an object. And we believe that we've been able to balance all concerns here and provide very accurate color for the targets, but also provide it for the objects. And instead of just continuing to talk about this, I'd love to show it to you. So I'm going to switch over to Capture One now. I'm going to bring up two versions of the same raw file. And this is the file I mentioned earlier, which was shot in 2011. It was shot by the Museum of Fine Art in Houston. And it is the same exact raw file, created two variants of it. On the left, we have the new cultural heritage profile, in this case referred to as flat art reproduction. On the right, we have the general commercial flash. This is the commercial profile meant for good skin tones and good greens and good sky color. So when we come in here, one of the most obvious differences you'll note is that the orange, which is in real life substantially more vibrant than it's shown on the right, it's much truer on the left. But you can imagine that for proper skin tones, that really bleeding oranges and really bleeding reds, high saturation of those hues, is knocked down a little bit in the commercial profiles. And it's knocked down very intelligently and with a lot of nuance. It's not a very strong effect, but it's there to make skin tones look right. Well, here on the fine art reproduction profile, the cultural heritage profile, you'll notice the orange is shown true to life, as is the more vibrant blue and green. And it looks spot on. Now, of course, you guys haven't seen this in the real world. You haven't seen this etching. And more to the point, in cultural heritage, we use not only visual aesthetic validation, but we also use numerical or machine automation to check targets. So we've included in this frame, or I should say in 2011, a target was included in this frame, which we can use to analyze the results of our color profiles now. And we were able to, from our archive of customer images, actually validate our profiles against a lot of previously captured work, which was really nice. So here we have a crop, again, showing just the two different color profiles. And we can process those out. To commercial and also to cultural heritage, process that out. And now we can switch over to Delt.AE. Where we can upload those up. And Delt.AE is a free service similar to Golden Thread. We'll also be showing this on Golden Thread here in a moment, which I think provides a very robust validation and a little more nuanced results. But here for the moment, we're going to stick with Delt.AE and just take a look as it processes through these files. It will analyze our color and give us feedback on metamorphosy and FADGI compliance. So here we can pull up the results. What we'll notice first in the commercial profile is that our SFR high frequency and SFR mid frequency over sharpening color misregistration are all excellent. But we notice that we only get 3 out of 4 color stars. And I don't know about you guys, but 3 out of 4 is not good enough for me. If we look at our detail, we have a delta E value, a very respectable value of 3.5, but I know we can do better than that. And here is our cultural heritage profiled image. We see that we get a full 4 out of 4 for FADGI compliance. We're also metamorphosy, the full metamorphosy compliant. And if we look at our detail, we'll see that our delta E value is all the way down to 2.6. So really, really good results. And the incredible part here is not necessarily the result. With a good in situ profile, we would maybe be able to come to a similar result. But I didn't have to profile this camera in this situation with the lights the way they were with a color target. I didn't have to spend time making sure I did it really, really carefully and make sure that I validated it against a whole range of files. All of that work was done for me already. By the time I select fine art reproduction, I'm already selecting a profile that's had that road work done, that's had the intelligent creation done, that's been validated in real world situations. I don't have to take the time to in situ profile, and I don't have to go through the perils or the potential problems of in situ profiling. So let's real quick switch over now to a Windows server. Okay, and here is our Windows server running Golden Thread. I'm selecting an object level target. I'm giving it a test profile that requires 4-star compliance in Adobe 1998. And I'll go ahead and select that same file, the cultural heritage version. I think we all know what we get if we do the commercial. We get very good but not excellent results. So we'll go ahead and skip to the cultural heritage. I'll do the crop. I'll run the analysis. And it gives me a full detailed report. And the one that we're most concerned about here is Delta E 2000 values. And we'll notice, and I do apologize, it's unfortunately not possible for me to show this larger on the screen than it is. However, the maximum Delta E value here is reflected as 4.9, and the mean is 2.3, both of which are well underneath the FADGI 4-star compliant levels, meaning that this image is FADGI 4-star compliant for Delta for color, for Delta E values in color matching. And you can sort of take a look now at the summary of what we were saying before, and I think hopefully from this demonstration, but more importantly from your own testing and feedback to us, I hope you'll agree that what we've created here is a set of profiles that gives you the same color target accuracy as in situ profiling, with a broader and more robust result that is not quite as fragile and not quite as finicky as in situ profiles sometimes can be. And that the end result here requires no user by the effort. Simply select the profile and you're good to go. A quick couple of technical notes. We have completed profiles for the IQ 180 and 160, and the 280 and the 260 in 8.1.1, and more profiles will be released in the very short term here for additional backs and additional luminance. So look for those in future releases. Give us feedback on how they're resulting for you. Make your own comparisons to in situ profiles. I should clarify that Capture One does now and always will support the in situ profile method. It still supports and will always support ICC profile inputs. So if you want to make your own profile and do your own in situ profiling, Capture One absolutely supports that. But I think you'll find these new cultural heritage profiles take away that work for most workflows. Next major topic I'd like to cover is auto crop and auto straighten. And again, I think anybody who's spent hours and hours manually cropping, this is going to really blow your mind. We have built something that is fast and flexible and fits into a cohesive cultural heritage workflow. So let's go ahead and go through these. Batch applicable. What do we mean by that? The auto crop tool can be run on multiple files just as well as can be run on one. So I can select one image and opt to run an auto crop. Or I can select all the images in this folder, and I can run the auto crop. The speed at which it runs is, of course, dependent on the speed of your computer. In this case, 15 files finished in about 3 seconds, and each one has been individually cropped and individually rotated based on that subject. So let's take a look at the results here. Each one of these has been individually cropped with a padding of 100. We'll take a look at more padding options later. And each one of these has been cropped to its specific subject matter. Notice some of the subjects are larger, some of them are smaller. Some of them have obvious issues like this tear. It is looking for the predominant rectangular shape, so small issues like this tear do not negatively impact it. All right, so that's the auto crop in batch mode. That is to simply say that it's as easy to do it for one as it is to do it for many. Let's take a look at the next major feature here. It's very flexible. It can ignore targets and other stuff in the frame. So here we have a target at the bottom and some tape or maybe some padding. I wasn't present at the shooting of this image, so I don't know what that is, but it's some sort of large white rectangular shape that might otherwise distract some other auto crop routines. What you'll find is that this one ignores those and goes straight for the subject. It knows to ignore targets, it knows to ignore small rectangulars, it knows to ignore small scratches on the glass surface here. It is purely built to identify the predominant rectangular object and crop to it. So it's very smart in that way. Next, We can auto straighten on any edge or corner. So off to the side here, and again, I know for some viewers, depending on your connection, the type will be very small, so I'll just read these off to you here. We can straighten based off the left, right, top, or bottom edges, or any of the corners, which are labeled as top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. So if we have something that's non-rectilinear, if it has a little deformity to it, or if we have an institutional priority or a previous work practice where we said crop it and prioritize the straightness of the top left, or the inside edge, or the outside edge, we can match that workflow here with the auto crop tool. We have a book scanning mode. Book scanning is a little funny case for auto cropping because the main content here is actually only the main page. If I look at just one of these images here, I'm not interested in seeing deep into the other page, right? So I want a crop that's going to come in like this. But if you can imagine, most general purpose auto crop tools are going to mistake this as a continuation of the left part of the image. So instead, we use the book scanning algorithm. And here again, it ignored the target, it ignored the right page, and it just crops in to the left page and the cover. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. And we can find that we can do that for one image or multiple images, and in each case, it will crop just the page of interest. This makes an excellent complement to our BC100, that is our 100-degree book scanning kit. That system provides for 100-degree angles. This is where this image is from, and creates that very clean 100-degree angle coming up off the other page, making it very easy to separate out the page of interest. Coming up now, we see padding, positive and negative. I like to demonstrate padding by showing a film because this is a scan made from our DT film positioning system, and then you can see a lot of traditional film mounts for slide film didn't have hard, crisp edges. And so we may want to have, my apologies, we may want to have the edges shown like that. We may want to include that border. If so, we can use a positive padding. Here's a padding of 100 pixels. And here is a padding of 400 pixels. You can see just more space around the object. But let's say I don't want to have those corners. I might want to instead use something like -80. And now when I do an auto crop, it'll crop into those edges, right? So now the end result is an image only to those edges. Keep in mind, all of these are non-destructive edits. Just like the basic version of Capture One Cultural Heritage provides non-destructive editing. And so this crop is as fleeting and temporary as I want it to be. It's not permanently removing file information, and I can do multiple types in the same file. So I could have a negative here, clone the variant, and with the variant, use a positive padding of, say, 150. And now I have both versions in one raw file, from one raw file. You could imagine sending the right one to preservation, the left one to a web presentation, or to a derivative folder, and not having to redo that work in Photoshop. That same padding can be applied positive or negative. So if we select all the images in this folder and reset the crops, we can find a -100 and auto crop all images. And there, our end result is cropped in from the edges, especially effective for film, but also effective if we want to crop in, for instance, on the letters or words of a page as opposed to the border of the page. And again, be able to create additional variants of those with a different kind of padding applied. So here in this folder, we now have 5 raw files, each of which have been padded to have with and without the edges. All right. Next up is fixed size, and fixed size is also well demonstrated on film. So let me just go ahead and reset some of these variants, and we can show you that. So these 3 pieces of film are the same physical size. They're all 35mm slides. And what we want to do is, instead of having the crop applied differently to each, we'll notice that the auto crop routine here has in fact picked up slightly different sizes for each of these objects. That's not terribly surprising. They're very, very similar sizes. But here we have 4688. Over here we have 4654, and over here we have 4722. All very slightly different sizes. If we want to have those be the same, I could instead reset the crop of all three, select the first one here and auto crop it. I can optionally manually enter a number to sort of round it up to a nice pretty number. Here's 4,700 by 6,900. I can now select all three, switch to fixed size mode, set the primary size, which is taking this crop's dimensions, 4,700 by 6,900, setting that as the primary crop. And now when I crop the additional images, you'll notice it locks in that same size, 4,700, 4,700, 4,700. It's still moving the frame and rotating it in order to fit the subject. So we see that the image is in a different place in each frame. So it's still doing the automatic cropping, but it's doing it with the same exact dimensions each time. All right, allows custom user guidance. So the next big thing is that the auto crop in Capture One allows robust manual guidance. And that can be very important because cultural heritage includes a lot of different kinds of stuff. And we don't want to have to restrict you to shooting it in a very specific way in order for the auto crop to work. So if we're in a pretty easy or even a moderately difficult situation like white on black or white on gray or gray on black or black on white, auto crop's going to have no problem identifying the subject. But here's a really tough case, right? We have a cream on cream. These two are incredibly close in tone. And the auto crop routine may not get this right. But we're able to add manual guidance to help it identify the subject matter. So because the auto crop is run on the image as seen in Capture One at the time of auto cropping, I can adjust one of these images in order to have a more obvious separation between the object and the background. Now when I run the auto crop, it'll identify the subject. It'll identify the subject. I can now select the remaining images, copy and apply that same set of adjustments, auto crop all of the images, and then finally reset the levels, reset the changes I had made to make them more visually obvious. And now we have all 10 correctly cropped, correctly rotated with a consistent padding, consistent rules regarding which edge should be straightened based on. And we've been doing that entirely without having to manually crop. So I know that that's several steps at once. What I'd like to do is I'm just going to go ahead and go through that entire process one more time, start to finish. So it's really easy to understand how we use this sort of manual assist to help the auto crop get its best results. So to do that, I'm going to go to one image. I'll reset the rotation. Go to one image, play around with the levels, play around with curves if necessary, and isolate the subject against this background. Now, this is really easy for human beings. We know what the letter is versus the background. We know what the target is versus the letter. So for us, it's very easy to simply drag around the black point, drag around the white point until we have a very clear difference between the two. When we've done that on one image, we can test to make sure that it's identifying the object correctly. It is. We can then undo that, select all the images, use the local copy and apply and the tools that we've been using to identify them. I don't want to cheat, so I'll reset the rotation that's already been applied from the last auto crop. And now we run the auto crop on all images. It will identify the object in each image and crop it consistently. And then all we have to remember to do is at the end, we need to just reset these levels so that we don't end up saving a file, so we don't end up creating a derivative with funky color. And that's it. We now have 10, in this case, letters, each cropped, excellent padding, and results. Now, let's take a look at an interesting case here. On this envelope, there's a little bit of torn paper at the top. And there's no right or wrong answer, although the institution should have some sort of guidance. So let's say that we, in fact, wanted to correct this crop. Well, since Capture One Cultural Heritage Edition is built off of the same tools as Capture One, we have the same robust set of tools like being able to create custom guides under View, Add Guide, horizontal or vertical, you can create as many guides as you like. In this case, I've created guides at the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. And if I want to drag this down to the top edge, or conversely, if I want to leave it where it is and come to just the top of the paper, I have that option within the same workflow that the auto crop ran under. So I have the cohesiveness of workflow of having the application of the auto crop apply within the same area that I'm doing the quality control for the auto crop. It's a very good workflow. So that's the custom user guidance. And I'm just going to briefly mention, because we talk more about AppleScript later, but all of the auto cropping and all of the crop setting, so manual crop setting of different sizes or locations or height or width, along with activating auto crop, is available via AppleScript. And so that provides some very advanced functionalities for those institutions that have a very specific workflow for cropping or have a very specific set of requirements, say asymmetrical padding, something like that. If we don't yet have a feature in there that is required for your workflow, you can request that feature. But if it's very specific, it might be best to try to build that in with AppleScript. And we'll talk more about AppleScript a little bit later today. So I just now want to show you the apply, on capture, and on crop. This is the part of the workflow that allows us to engage auto cropping automatically after something. So either after the capture of the image or after the cropping has been done manually. And so for that, I'm going to switch over to this example here, where we have two slides. And these slides were shot on the DT-FPS, and our film positioning system allows both reflective light and transmissive light. So you'll see in this image, this is my dad at one of his first jobs, nice gentleman with the mustache. He said he was a very cool dude, and from this picture, I believe him. The cropping into that image is going to be complicated because the reflective light is showing me the slide holder and, up here, the notation, some sort of notation of what the slide number or category is. I'm not going to have a clear vision here for the auto crop tool of which rectangle I want to crop to. Is it going to be the outside here of the holder? Is it going to be the slide? Is it going to be the inside edge? So I'm going to instead use on crop. And on crop means that when I place a manual crop onto the image, I don't have to be very careful with it. I don't have to be very precise. I just have to isolate the area that I care about, and the auto crop will kick in afterwards. Again, watch on the right. I drag a fast and loose crop, and it crops in there. And I could do this much faster. I want to do it a little bit slower in order to show the step-by-step, but you can imagine since you don't have to be very precise about this, you can simply reach over, draw a quick crop, and it does it. And again, the same rules about straightening, the same padding precision is provided in this method as with the generic auto crop usage. I can also use a technique that we call pre-crop ROI, meaning that we're identifying an area of interest between different frames, copying and applying that crop, and then running the auto crop on all images from there. It's similar to using on crop, but it works even faster in bulk. If you can imagine if there's another 500 files like this, then adding a first crop that just shows the inside edge, and then running the auto crop on those files is going to be substantially faster than using the on crop and manually cropping. We can also use on capture. On capture allows us to trigger auto crop immediately after an image has been captured. When we are doing a little bit later, we're doing a book to scan in real time. I will show you on crop in the auto crop, and I think you'll find that it's very useful for the operator. The moment they push the button, the image comes in and it's already automatically cropped. Now, this is again non-destructive. I don't want to harp on that too much, but it's easy to forget that even though we're cropping it immediately after capture, that crop is just an adjustment that can be easily dismissed or changed should we require something different after capture. So there's no destruction of the data, just a tag. And then finally, all of this can be done with and without the crop enabled upon output. So here we have a presentation JPEG at 80%, half size with crop and sharpened. Here we have a preservation master, no crop, no sharpening, 16-bit TIFF. If I process these two files, and I will put those onto the desktop. If I process these two files, each of the two raw files will be processed in two different ways. So here we'll have on the desktop a JPEG 2000 that is cropped, And right after that, we see a TIFF, which is 16-bit, a very large file, and is uncropped. Likewise, the second raw file, we see a JPEG 2000 that's cropped, and a 16-bit TIFF, which is uncropped. We can do that using an option here called Ignore Crop, which simply overrides the crop so that you don't have to manually reset it. Right? We also have the option of creating a cloned variant and uncropping them so we have two different versions of each file, or we can use Ignore Crop to override the crop that's present in the file. So lots of flexibility, lots of versatility on how to incorporate automatic cropping and auto crop and auto straightening into our workflow. Transmissive. So this is, I think, one of the coolest parts of the story about Capture One Cultural Heritage, because with the partnership we now have between the Division of Cultural Heritage and Phase One, we are able to provide total solutions at the same time. So when we started working on Capture One Cultural Heritage, we let Phase One know, hey, in 6 months or so, we're going to have a really great film scanning system that can do positive and negatives, that can do film and glass plates and lantern slides, do black and white, can do color. We would like to have some tools in Capture One that could help extend that physical piece of hardware we're creating, so that the second half of the process, once the picture is on the screen, the rest of the process is faster. And Phase One, Peter Stieg and the team at Capture One Cultural Heritage really jumped on that and gave us some fantastic tools. And we've collaborated on some of the specifics here to make sure that when you're scanning with the DT film positioning system, the rest of the workflow is very fast, very flexible, and is a very cohesive workflow. So let's take a look at this. We have automatic and manual tools. We can do black and white or color. We can do both positive and negative materials, and we can do any type of previous materials. Let's take a look at how this looks in Capture One. So here's an easy one. This is a black and white glass plate negative, manually masked off here, and we see that in Capture One, instead of just using photography, we will switch this to repro negative. My apologies. For black and white, we're going to go up to Adjustments, Styles, Built-in Styles, Cultural Heritage Film Scanning Black and White, and here we have a variety of presets that get us very close in the right ballpark to start with, which we can then tweak as desired for a good inversion of this file. So we can handle very high dynamic range scenes. We can handle black and whites, whether they're negative, or we can handle them if they're black. You got their glass plates. If you've ever worked with glass plates, they can be very dense. And yet the dynamic range of our system, along with the tools here in Capture One, provide us a very good option for their inversion. But let's be honest, black and white inversion, not nearly as hard as color inversion. So now that we're warmed up, let's go for the hard one. Here's a color negative. And actually, we'll start here with the fruit. Here's some color negative. We switch to repro negative. We white balance the image. We can adjust the exposure generally. I'll pause here for that individual to mute themselves or to be muted. Very good. And now returning here, so we switched it to repro negative. We decrease the exposure. My apologies, wrong button. And now we will run an auto level and white balance against that white, and there we go. A very decent starting point for color negative in a few automatic clicks. Now we still have the full range of Capture One tools here. So again, if we want to do any manual tweaking, we can modify the red, the blue, the green. We can do levels or full full RGB curves for any hand correction or any aesthetic that we're trying to render. Remember that in the cultural heritage community, it's often the case that we're trying to create two separate files, one that is a preservation master, so we could keep that. We could keep one where the file is, in fact, shown as a reproduction, shown as a negative as a negative, so to speak. And then the negative as a positive, and we may want to be correcting this to a reference print that we have. We may want to correct it to an aesthetic that we know the photographer followed in other similar work. Or we may be hand correcting it based on our own aesthetics. In any case, we have very good automatic tools and then very good manual follow-up as required. Let's take a look at how this works here on this image of 4 gentlemen on a hill. We switch from photography to repro negative. We adjust exposure up and down. We white balance. We auto level. And we have a very good starting point. To me, that's actually probably the way I want this file presented. From there, if I want to adjust the sort of stylistic rendering, add contrast, play with the white balance to be custom, play with levels or curves, I have all of those tools available. But in just a few automatic clicks, I was able to get a very good inversion of that color negative. We talked about the fact that you can create both a positive and a negative. We can do that on every capture, and when we talk later about the dual crop or multi-crop tool, you'll see that we can also do that immediately upon capture, create both a positive and a negative, which is very, very useful to a informed technician, somebody who is familiar with photography and knows what to look for in a color negative. The fact that immediately upon capture you can create both the positive and negative allows them to look over and immediately see both the object as is, as well as the final derivative they plan on creating. And then finally, all of these adjustments are non-destructive. So even though we're able to make some very extensive changes, add styling, we could, for instance, add dodge and burns that we take from notes found alongside or stored alongside the original negatives. We are never editing the original raw data, so we've never made any permanent changes to that, and we can always go back and make additional changes or tweaks. Okay, Apple scripting. Apple scripting is very unusual in that it's not a tool. It's a way to create tools. It's a language. Apple scripting is something available for all programs Apple scripting is available for all programs in the Mac operating system, but they're only as good as the hooks or the cues that the program provides. So a lot of programs only provide some very basic ones, and truth be told, Capture One only provided some rudimentary AppleScript code or hooks in Capture One 6 and in Capture One 7. But in Capture One 8 Cultural Heritage, we have a huge dictionary of tools in Apple scripting. And for anybody who's done Apple scripting, you can simply open up a dictionary of the Capture One tools and see that we have here a huge list of tools available or hooks available in AppleScript. Things that we can set, things that we can access, we can activate the auto crop, we can apply a different crop, we can modify and get the current crop, we can get the current crop and modify it. So we have a huge range of tools or hooks to create tools with. And some very basic ones might look like a self-timer. A self-timer in Capture One might be as simple as saying delay 5 seconds, tell Capture One, capture. That's it. A very simple tool, very easy to write, and that might be useful if, for instance, you are triggering the camera from the computer, but you want to be able to hold up a reflector or a gobo or prop up an item before a picture is taken. We can do that with the self-timer very easily because of that capture command built into the AppleScript library. I want to show you now before I talk about the Shutter integration, I'm going to tell you that the dictionary of AppleScript library entries, or the library of the AppleScript commands that we built in, we will be running an AppleScript short course at ISNT for those commands. That is at the Getty this year in the United States in Los Angeles, California, in May of 2015. And that is titled Automating Away the Pain, Apple Scripting in Capture One Cultural Heritage. So if you have any interest in AppleScript, if you are already going to or would be interested in going to ISNT, it's an archiving conference for the Cultural Heritage community, then we would definitely encourage you to sign up for that short course. It's going to be a 4-hour intensive workshop. Along with myself, we're going to have the head of Phase 1's Capture One programming team, the head of that team, at the AppleScript course, who is also the guy who needs to bless the addition of additional commands. So if you come to the event and there's a command you need that's not available, well, that's a very good time for you to make the case that it should be in there. And I tell you what, with him being there, I think the odds are very good. The short course would really help jumpstart you on solutions like integrating into a database. If you have a list, If you can draw from your database a list of files or a list of items or objects that should be inside of a folder or a box, we can automatically, for instance, speak the name of the object out loud from the computer, have the operator confirm that that's what's in their hand. They put it down on the table, it automatically takes a picture, it automatically names the object or the file on the computer based on the object from the database. And at the end, it can validate that the number of items and the naming of the items matches the database for that folder. We can do some very sophisticated things. Those are all kind of custom. They depend on your database, depend on your workflow. But this short course would really go a long way to helping you build those solutions. So now I want to take a look at a tool that we have built, that we have released for free. I want to show you that we have on our website, dtdch.com, that's dtdch.com, under DCH blog, you'll see the first article just released today is the Shutter integration solution, which takes advantage of a lot of these AppleScript hooks. And for those of you who have a Schneider control system that use the DTR cam with an electronic shutter, I think this will be very impressive to you. We can now fully integrate the normal operation of the camera with Capture One. So in the DTDCH shutter control software, we now allow for direct integration with Live View and direct triggering of the camera even if Capture One is not in the foreground. So if we open up Live View now, the lens will automatically open. If we close Live View, the lens will automatically close. And if we have something else in the foreground, like we have Text Edit open, and we say, hello, I'm Text Edit, and I'm in the foreground. If I now use my foot pedal or the keyboard shortcut Command-K, it will automatically switch to Capture One and take the picture. So this provides us a little tighter integration between the shutter control application and Capture One, and we built that around the same AppleScript library that's available to all of you to integrate into other third-party software. So we definitely encourage you to play around with AppleScript and to come to that conference if possible and join our short course. Workspaces. So workspaces in Capture One have always been highly customizable. If anybody's taken our Basics Capture One webinar class or our comp class, we spent a lot of time talking about different ways that we can use different workspaces. And we can add and remove tools, we can rearrange tools, we can add a exposure evaluation to the top of this one, or flow to histogram on top of everything. And we can add and remove individual tabs. And all of that is available in Capture One Cultural Heritage. But what we wanted to do was create maybe something that didn't require as much customization, that started off a little closer to what most cultural heritage institutions would want. And so what we did was we spent a lot of time talking to customers, seeing what tools they use and how they refer to the terminology of each one of the steps in their process. What came up with was reflective and transmissive, pre-flight and production, or quality control and processing. So when we're in pre-flight or production, we'll notice that the first tab here is labeled pre-flight, second tab is called production, and it's all about that process of first setting up for the shoot and then producing the shoot, continuing to capture new images. This same terminology is carried throughout our different workspaces, and it's installed by default with every Capture One Cultural Heritage installation, which means you no longer have to look. If you walk over to somebody else's computer, if you have multiple stations in a single lab, you don't have to worry about coordinating your workspaces. These workspaces are already there for you. They're still customizable further, so if you have specific needs, if you like to use the curves, and the curves aren't present in a workspace, you can add them and save them back, but they are there as a better starting point. All right, so then the last thing I want to show you is, at least the last thing I can remember right now, is the multi-crop tool. And the multi-crop tool is a really very powerful workflow tool. What it allows us to do is create multiple output derivatives automatically at the time of capture. So I want to explain that because I am working on a webinar, I do have the overhead lights on, and you can see a little bit of a globe there. What I want to show you here is the option to create a left and a right page, a left page and right page split, and have that be maintained for additional captures. So what I'm going to do is manually crop the left page, manually select here and do clone variant, bring this over to the right, And now this capture has two different variants, a left and a right. And I could show them with or without the crop, and I could process them out separately. What I'm going to show you now is a way to maintain that setting, the left page, right page motif, while I'm capturing. I can go to Scripts, Dual Crop, and turn it on. And when Dual Crop tool is on, I can select Copy Variants from Primary under Next Capture Adjustments. So again, that's Scripts, Dual Crop, and once that's enabled under Next Capture Adjustments, you can select Copy Variants from Primary. Now I can take a picture of a new page. And as that capture comes in, you'll see two derivatives automatically created, a left page and a right page split already. Now it goes further than this. I can actually create more than just a left-right page split. Here I'm going to select the left and the right page, clone them, and for these two variants, I'm going to make them black and white and high contrast. This could be useful for legibility versions or for presentation on lower quality devices. So now I have four derivatives for each file. I have a left and right page in black and white and in color. And again, since the copy variants from last is engaged, I'm going to go over and shoot a new set of pages, a new spread, and you'll see it pop up all four for the new page. My apologies, I pushed the wrong button, so you're going to see the same page there. Oh, no, that wasn't the new page. Great. So one more time, I'm going to lower the page. And capture. And I have the left and right page in high contrast and in normal color. This can be used the same way to create the positive and negative of a transmissive object, to create the cropped and uncropped version, to create a version with and without the color bar or the object level target in frame, and can be used in conjunction with the auto crop tool for multiple objects. So if I'm shooting additional photographic prints and I can shoot 4 or 5 at a time at the resolution that I want, I can place down 5 regions of interest, shoot them all, and then activate auto crop at the very end, and it will auto crop each individual item based on its region of interest, which was dictated at the time of capture and confirmed in quality control by the technician at the time of capture. Very cohesive workflow, very fast and efficient, and very powerful. So today, oh, there we go, and the lab readouts. I almost forgot the lab readouts. So we'll talk about the lab readouts now. Talk about the lab readouts. I will go back and recall the image from the Museum of Fine Art in Houston. Now in this image, we already discussed it has a golden thread target present in it, and one of the nice features about the golden thread target is that it's self-described, meaning that each one of the values is described here in lab directly underneath the patch, which means that this patch here, patch 10, should be 97.06 for a luminance value and should have a very low A and B value. In Capture One, I can now add a lab readout. I access lab readout by clicking and holding in the top right, selecting Add Color Readout, and making sure that I select View Lab Readout and select one of the modes. We'll talk about these different modes here in a moment, but for right now, just notice that I can drop down different points and see how close I am on each one. Now, it's actually very tempting now. We have 4 digits of accuracy. It's very tempting to become overly critical. For FADGI compliance, all three of these patches are well underneath the deviation required by FADGI 4-star. This one, in fact, is less than something like a 20th of 1%, and here well underneath 1% for each of these. So we are doing extremely well. If anybody is using a screen sharing connection where you can't see these numbers very easily, what I can tell you is that these are varying between 96.9 and 97.06, which is in fact exactly where we want to be. In addition, Capture One does allow you to make adjustments to exposure in as small as hundredth of a stop changes. This is a very small change. If you're not familiar with photographic stops, a hundredth of a stop is barely visible. But if I change it from 0.21 here to pushing it 0.22, we can see the corresponding change on the patch is actually very high. And that all means that I can give this patch as much precision as I want. I can really, really, really nail the specific white point of this image. So that's the lab value. And again, we do have a variety of methods for lab, and this is because for some really obscure and frankly difficult to understand technical reasons, we have different types of lab readouts available out there in the market. And if you notice, when you hover over these, it gives you a description of what they're useful for, which applications use that specific method. The overriding thing to remember about this, the most important thing to remember about this, there's very subtle differences. Each one of these options is just a little bit different. But if you are trying to match a workflow where you're validating in Golden Thread, or you're validating in Delt.ae or LCMS, these applications use a very specific implementation of lab, and we can match each one of them. And I think this is really, even though it's a minor change, I think it's a very salient point about the construction of Capture One Cultural Heritage. We had the option of just matching Adobe Photoshop in the way that they do lab so that the number would match Photoshop, but instead we went through the effort to match each of the major industry standards so that we can be 100% correct compared to any of these existing third-party softwares. So there you go, that is lab, and very useful for setting exposure, especially if you're using Golden Thread targets. And that takes us to the end of the benefits of raw workflow and Capture One Cultural Heritage. Again, the most important part here is our dedication to getting additional feedback and building additional features in the future, building this out even more. For any institution that's doing a lot of manual cropping, this could save you very easily right now today a full-time equivalent's worth of labor each year on cropping. The lab tool is unbelievably useful for those who are really obsessed about getting the best quality. The color profiles could knock out hours each month of in-situ profiling and make a profile that we feel is more robust even than that effort would have gotten you. So I think the tools we have in there are already stellar, but we're dying for more feedback. We're dying to make even more features for you guys. We're really committed to it. So Allison, can I ask if there's been any questions so far? We can address those at this time.
I just sent one over to you, and so
would you mind reading it out?
Sure. It was in regards to auto crop, and what if you want to have with a target and without a target? How would you set that?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So there are two workflows we can employ for using with and without the target here. The first is that when we auto crop, we can use the output option of ignore crop. I do apologize, by the way, there might be a little bit of a screaming sound or a shrieking sound behind my voice. The neighboring building has not had construction active for 3 months, but they decided to start about an hour before our webinar. So hopefully that's not too disruptive. So here our auto cropping will automatically pick up the subject matter, and in the output we could select to not crop one of the outputs. So in this case we have, if we put this file out, we have ignore crop set to the preservation master, and the JPEG 2000 we have to include the crop. So this will create a file with and without. It's chugging along. So when this file is done, we'll have one with and without the target. If instead we wanted to have this version and this version, we could also accomplish that using a variety of AppleScript solutions. So you can imagine a solution built around AppleScript wherein the color target remains the same place for each frame, say at the very bottom center, and the auto crop kicks in, and then AppleScript simply brings the crop to either the very bottom or near the bottom of the frame, keeping the same left, same top, and same right values. That would be a fairly easy AppleScript to write, and the only reason it's not included is because it's going to vary a little bit differently for each institution exactly how they want to do that. It's possible that in the future, based on feedback, maybe we could add additional features on how to handle specifically a target. But for right now, you don't need to wait for that. You could do a very good solution right now with AppleScript that provides this crop right alongside this crop. So here we go. So here's the file with the crop applied, JPEG 2000. And here's no crop, which includes the target. All right, any other questions, Allison?
So far, no.
All right, Mr. Siegel, would you like to bid everyone adieu?
I certainly will. Doug, I have to say thank you for doing this, and thank you everyone who attended this webinar today. Obviously, we'll be doing more of these as more features arrive and new products come out. A special thank you to Peter Stieg-Nielsen as well for staying up way past his normal work hour. Another indication of the dedication to this particular market sector. Again, if anyone has any questions, please send them in to info@dttch.com. If you're in the United States, if you're outside the United States, please contact your local Phase 1 cultural heritage dealer. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon, everybody.